Here are some facts about me. I slept naked with my young niece. I left my dying father and went to a woman. I forbade my wife to go out without my permission. My son was an alcoholic. All facts are truth. I am Mahatma Gandhi, a leader and advocate of nonviolent resistance in India's struggle for independence from British rule. Through the philosophy of Satyagraha, I promoted truth, nonviolence, and civil disobedience as the means to bring about social and political change. My efforts inspired movements for civil rights and freedom across the world. I am ashamed of some things, and some things almost destroyed me. However, it is an integral part of my life. It proves that famous people have the same problems and life challenges as everyone else. Now all about it in more detail. Section 1. I forbade my wife to go out without my permission. Ah, the arrogance of youth! It is a fire that burns brightly, yet blinds us to the shadows we cast upon those closest to us. Kasturba and I were married at a young age, in 1883, when I was just 13 and she was 14. We were children, yet the institution of marriage placed the weight of adulthood upon us. In that early period, we neither understood the sacredness of the vows nor the burdens that came with them. Kasturba, whom I later called my Ba, was thrust into this journey beside me. She bore it with a grace that I did not deserve, though at the time, I was too blind to see it. In those early days, I was not her partner or her equal. No, I was her jailer. I, who would later speak of freedom, equality, and justice, sought to control her, to mold her into a figure that suited my whims and ambitions. I forbade her from stepping out without my permission, as though her dignity and desires were less important than mine. And why did I do this? Because society told me I could. Because I believed it was my right. I had not yet learned the true meaning of partnership. What a foolish man I was! I mistook dominance for love, authority for care. I demanded respect from her, but I never earned it. And yet, Kasturba, she endured. Her strength was silent but unyielding. It stood in quiet defiance of my tyranny, though I failed to see it at the time. I can still recall moments, early in our marriage, when my words were sharp and my actions even sharper, expecting her to submit to my authority. But Kasturba, my Ba, was not one to respond with fear. She would remain silent, but I could see the sorrow in her eyes, the quiet resistance in her posture. It was not defiance, but dignity. And that dignity, how it shamed me! Her gaze spoke volumes. It was a mirror, reflecting the pettiness of my soul. That moment, though there were many like it, planted a seed of self-awareness in me. But like all seeds, it took years to grow. Even as we grew older, and as I began my work in South Africa fighting for the rights of Indian immigrants, I still struggled with the weight of my own shortcomings. The lessons I would later speak of, nonviolence, equality, justice, were not ideas that emerged from textbooks or speeches, but from Kasturba. It was her example, her quiet strength, that guided me. My greatest teacher was not a book, nor a mentor, but the very woman I had sought to dominate. I can see now that Kasturba's quiet resistance was not a form of rebellion, but a reflection of her inner strength. It was a dignity that stood firm in the face of my ignorance and pride. And it was through her example that I learned to see the value of true equality and nonviolence. Her love and sacrifice, though often unspoken, were the greatest lessons of my life. And how I wish I had learned those lessons sooner. If there is one deep regret that I carry with me, it is that I learned the true value of her love and sacrifice through my own mistakes. In my youth, I failed to recognize the profound depths of her devotion, not only to me but to the principles we both came to share later in life. Kasturba taught me that love cannot be commanded. It cannot be wielded like a weapon or enforced through authority. Love must be given freely. And this was the lesson that would shape the course of my work, my advocacy, and my life. When I reflect upon those early years, I often wonder how different our relationship could have been if I had listened to her earlier, if I had respected her as an equal partner in the truest sense. I wish I could go back to that young boy, full of pride and ignorance, and tell him to listen more, to respect more, and to see the jewel that was his ba. But life, as we know, does not offer such luxuries. It moves forward, and we must grow with it. And so, I offer you this reflection, a confession of sorts. If there is a lesson here, it is that even the smallest of tyrannies, those that exist within the walls of our homes, can leave the deepest scars. I see now that every act of control, every moment of arrogance, took something from her, though she bore it all with such grace. We cannot wait, as I did, to understand the worth of those we love. We must honor them now, before it is too late. Let us not wait until we are too old or too weary to see the love and sacrifice that others give to us. Let us not mistake dominance for love. Kasturba's grace and dignity were the foundation of my own humanity. It was through her quiet resistance that I came to understand that true love is not about control, but about mutual respect and support. It is not about imposing one's will upon the other, but about sharing a vision of equality, compassion, and justice. Looking back, I realized that she was the true force behind my work. Without her, I could not have done what I did. Without her quiet strength, I could not have found the courage to fight for justice. I only hope that, in the years we had together, I gave her even a fraction of the love and respect that she deserved. Kasturba, my ba, was not just my wife. She was my greatest teacher. Through her, I learned that love is not something that can be demanded. It must be given freely, without conditions. And through her, I learned the true meaning of nonviolence and equality, not as abstract ideals, but as the foundation of a life built together in mutual respect. For that, I will be forever grateful. Section 2. I left my dying father and went to a woman. There are moments in life that linger in one's memory, moments that grow with the years until they become part of the very soul. For me, that moment came not on the battlefield of liberation or in the debates of a courtroom, but in the quiet of a family home, under the dim light of oil lamps, where duty and desire met, and I made a choice that would haunt me forever. My father, Karamchand Gandhi, lay frail in his bed, his breast shallow and labored. He was nearing the end of his life, his time slipping away with each passing hour, like sand through clenched fingers. My father had been the pillar of our family, a man of deep principle, integrity, and strength. His life was a testament to his unwavering beliefs. He had been a guiding force for me, and in his final days I had vowed to serve him, to care for him in whatever way he needed. Night after night, I sat beside him, massaging his legs, watching over him as he lingered between life and death. I tried to ease his pain, offering him whatever comfort I could. His suffering was my suffering, and I was determined to stay by his side until the very end. But then came that fateful night. I was not the man of wisdom that I would later become, nor the man of clarity and purpose that history would remember. I was, instead, a boy consumed by youthful desires. A boy who, at that moment, failed to see the gravity of the responsibility that lay upon me. Kasturba, my beloved wife, was in our room, and despite my duties to my father, I allowed my mind and body to betray me. The pull of my baser instincts, the desire for the fleeting pleasures of the flesh, was stronger than the sacred duty that bound me to my father's bedside. And so I left him. I left the man who had given me life, the man who had shaped me into who I was, to seek solace in the arms of my wife. And while I was gone, while I indulged in my selfishness, my father passed away. Alone. Unattended. In those final, sacred moments, I was not there. I had abandoned him, and the reality of my failure struck me with the force of a thunderclap when I returned and found him gone. I had failed him, and I had failed not just as a son, but as a human being. The stillness of my father's body was a profound and painful reminder of my failure. I had missed the opportunity to be by his side as he crossed the threshold between life and death. I had denied him the dignity of a proper farewell, and in doing so, I had lost something far more significant than any momentary pleasure. The shame I felt that night burned deep within me, and the weight of it still haunts me today. I have often wondered why this moment continues to haunt me. Is it because I knew better? Is it because I understood the importance of my duty, yet chose to ignore it? Or is it because that moment revealed to me the frailty of my own character, the ease with which I could falter? I believe it is a combination of all these things. This memory became a cornerstone of my life, a painful but essential lesson carved into the very stone of my existence. It taught me that indulgence, even in its most human forms, must never take precedence over duty. It reminded me that the smallest of actions, the seemingly insignificant moments, can have consequences far greater than we can imagine. Our weaknesses, no matter how brief, can echo through our lives. They leave scars that cannot be erased. I share this with you not to unburden myself, for this burden is mine to carry alone. I share it because I hope that, through my failure, you might see the importance of duty, of honoring the ones you love while they are still with you. In my moment of weakness, I learned a profound lesson. And perhaps, in the telling of this story, you can learn from it as well. If there is one lesson to be taken from this painful recollection, it is this: never take the presence of your loved ones for granted. Never allow the fleeting desires of the body or the distractions of the world to blind you to what truly matters. It is only in the absence of those we love that we realize how much we took them for granted. And when they are gone, it is not their absence that haunts us. It is the memory of our own failings, the moments we chose selfishness over duty, pleasure over responsibility, distractions over love. I know, deep down, that my father forgave me that night. He was a man of compassion and understanding. He knew my heart, and I believe he understood the struggles I faced. But forgiveness from him, as deeply as I cherished it, did not erase my regret. Perhaps, in a way, it was a blessing that I have not yet forgiven myself. Perhaps that is what keeps me grounded, what keeps me striving to live a life of greater integrity. The memory of my failure has been a constant reminder of the importance of self-discipline, of duty, and of the love and respect we owe to those who care for us. This is not just the story of a man who failed as a son. It is the story of a man who learned, through the most painful of lessons, the importance of selflessness and of honoring those we love while they are still with us. It is a reminder to cherish every moment, to never take the people we care about for granted, and to always be present in their lives, especially when they need us the most. In the years that followed, I dedicated myself to the ideals of truth, nonviolence, and justice. I strove to live in accordance with these principles, always remembering the lesson my father taught me through his life and death. But I also carried with me the weight of my own mistake, the knowledge that even the smallest failure, the briefest moment of selfishness, can have lasting consequences. So I offer this story not to absolve myself, but to share the lesson I have learned. For those of you who are still walking the path of life, I urge you to remember the importance of presence, of duty, and of love. Do not let the distractions of the world or the fleeting desires of the moment cloud your vision. Honor those you love, and never take for granted the precious time you have with them. My father forgave me, I believe, but I have not yet forgiven myself. Perhaps that is how it should be. It is a lesson that I will carry with me for the rest of my days. And perhaps, in the end, That is what has shaped me into the person I am today. Section 3. My son was an alcoholic. It is often said that the soul of a father lives in the hearts of his children. Yet I often wonder, what happens when that bond is fractured? What happens when a father's expectations are too great and too heavy for the heart of a son to bear? Harilal, my firstborn, was both my greatest joy and my deepest sorrow. From the moment he was born, I had such dreams for him, such high hopes. He was my eldest son, the child through whom I imagined my vision of a better world would be carried forward. I wanted him to be everything I had strived to become, a man of principle, of wisdom, and of service to humanity. But in my single-minded pursuit of these ideals, I failed to see him for who he truly was, and that was my greatest mistake. Harilal was full of promise from a young age, a spirited and inquisitive child who had a mind of his own. Yet, he was also full of questions, a questioning spirit that sought understanding and freedom, not just from the constraints of British rule, but from the authority I imposed on him as his father. He wanted the same freedom of choice that I advocated for others, but I could not see it. Instead, I was caught up in the fervor of my ideals, and I failed to recognize that, in my pursuit of truth, I was neglecting the simple, human truth of fatherhood. I thought I was building a better world, not just for India, but for my children, for all children. I believed that my work, my sacrifices, would provide them with the future they deserved. Yet, in my zeal, I overlooked the most basic of needs that Harilal had, the need for a father who would listen, who would understand, and who would support him as an individual. I thought I could guide him with my principles alone, but principles are not enough when the heart of a son yearns for something more. Harilal begged me to let him study abroad, to explore the world and learn in ways that I could not imagine. But I refused. I could not bear the thought of him stepping outside the path I had envisioned for him. When he sought independence, when he desired to live a life of his own making, I stood in his way. I was inflexible, rigid in my beliefs, and I did not see that my values, my love for simplicity and austerity, were becoming a chain around his soul. I imposed my vision of a perfect life on him, and in doing so, I denied him the chance to find his own. And so, Harilal rebelled. His rebellion was not one of outward defiance at first, but a quiet rejection of everything I had taught him. He turned to drinking, to vices that I could not understand, seeking refuge in things that were not the path I had set for him. He made decisions that I could not comprehend, and when he converted to Islam, I could not grasp the reasons behind it. I believed it was an act of defiance, not of faith. In truth, I could not see that his conversion was a desperate attempt to carve out an identity for himself, a way to step out of the shadow I had cast over him. My rigidity and refusal to understand him pushed him further away, and each step he took into rebellion felt like a dagger to my chest. I believed my example would be enough. I thought my principles would guide him as they had guided me. But Harilal did not want to walk in my shadow. He wanted to cast his own. And I, too proud and too blind to see this, continued to hold on to the belief that he should follow the path I had laid out for him. I could not let go, and in not letting go, I drove him further into the darkness of his own struggles. I failed him when he needed understanding the most. The final blow came in the later years of his life, when I saw him broken, destitute, and lost. Harilal, who had once been the light of my life, the boy full of hope and potential, had become a man consumed by his own battles that I had failed to help him fight. He turned to alcohol, seeking solace in a fleeting escape from the pain and the burdens he carried. And I was not there to ease his suffering. I was not there to offer him the love and support he needed, the very love I had so freely given to the world but withheld from him. Harilal's death, estranged from me, consumed by his own struggles, was the greatest failure of my life. I had spent my life preaching love and truth, yet I could not offer enough of it to my own son. The silence in my heart when I think of him is not the silence of peace but the silence of regret. Did he forgive me for my failures as a father? Did he understand that I only wanted the best for him, even if my actions did not reflect that? I will never know. And perhaps the hardest part of all is that I have not forgiven myself. I have not forgiven myself for failing to be the father he needed. Perhaps that is something I will never be able to do. My ideals have moved mountains, yes. But they have also crushed the tender hearts closest to me. The pain of Harel's life, his struggles, and his death is a wound that I carry with me. It is a lesson I wish I had learned sooner, that the pursuit of a greater good must never come at the cost of those we hold dearest. I see now that, in my efforts to change the world, I failed to change myself. I failed to see the world through the eyes of my son. Harilal may be gone, but his spirit lingers in my heart, a constant reminder that even the Mahatma is but a flawed man. And so I ask myself every day, what is the measure of a father's love? Can it ever be enough when weighed against the pain of a lost son? I still wonder if my love for him could have been expressed differently, if I had understood sooner what he truly needed from me. But these are questions I can no longer answer. The only thing I can do is carry the lessons learned from Harel's life, the mistakes I made, and the pain of my own failure. If there is one truth I have learned, it is this: the pursuit of truth and justice must never come at the cost of those we love. No cause is worth more than the people who stand beside us, and no ideal can replace the love and care that should bind us to our families. I failed as a father, and that failure is a burden that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Harel's pain and his estrangement from me are reminders of how easily we can lose sight of what truly matters. As I reflect on his life, I understand that it is not just the victories in the world that matter, but the relationships we nurture in our own homes. Harel's life and death have shown me the price of neglecting those closest to us. In my search for a better world, I lost sight of the world right in front of me, the world of my son, and the love he so desperately needed from me. Harilal is gone, but his spirit lives on in my heart. And in my heart I will always ask myself, what could I have done differently? What could I have done for my son to help him find his way? Section 4. I slept naked with my young niece. I embarked on a journey to find purity, to transcend the temptations of the world, to seek truth. At the heart of it all, I believed in the path of Brahmacharya, a vow of celibacy meant to purify body, mind, and soul. I, who had walked the path of self-discovery and asceticism for years, thought I could rise above earthly desires. But what began as a noble pursuit became a misguided experiment, one that would come to define my later years, for reasons I deeply regret. Brahmacharya was not just a vow, it was an intense spiritual commitment. I believed that by renouncing the pleasures of the body, I could purify myself and elevate my consciousness. I thought that by relinquishing my desires, I could achieve a higher state of being, becoming a true vessel for nonviolence, for truth, and for spiritual clarity. But the very discipline I sought to perfect became a trap, one that ensnared me in my own ego and pride. As I advanced in years and my obsession with controlling the body's passions grew stronger, I devised a personal experiment. This was not a decision made in a moment of weakness, but in a misguided belief that my control over the body would serve as an example to others. I invited young women, including my own grandniece, to sleep beside me unclad, not for any physical pleasure, but to test my resolve, to prove that I could conquer the most basic human instincts. I convinced myself that I could maintain my celibacy, my purity, even in the face of temptation. In this way, I thought I would demonstrate that even the most intimate human desires could be controlled by sheer willpower. But in hindsight, I see the folly of my actions. What I thought was a demonstration of self-control and spiritual strength was, in reality, a betrayal of the very principles I had fought so hard to uphold. I violated the trust of those closest to me, and I damaged my own reputation and credibility. The very ideals I had espoused, truth, compassion, love, were betrayed by my own behavior. I became a prisoner of my own experiment, and in seeking purity, I lost the very essence of what it meant to be pure. It was in this period of my life that the world discovered what I had done. The public condemnation was swift and unforgiving, and rightly so. My actions were reckless, and my belief that I could transcend the human condition by subjecting myself to such tests was misplaced. I had failed to recognize the most fundamental aspect of human dignity, the need for boundaries, for respect, and for compassion. I had acted not as a teacher, not as a guide, but as a flawed human being who had lost sight of what was truly sacred. The shock and disappointment from those who had followed me and trusted me were palpable. I had spent my life advocating for nonviolence, for truth, for purity, and now I had become an example of hypocrisy. I could not help but wonder how I had become so blind, so caught up in my own righteousness, that I had failed to see the harm I was causing. The very people I sought to help, the very ideals I sought to uphold, were now tarnished by my actions. Looking back, I realized the extent of my mistake. I thought I could rise above the basic human conditions of desire and temptation, but in doing so, I lost touch with what it means to be truly human. I had sought to purify myself, but instead, I had sullied my reputation, my mission, and most painfully, my relationship with those I loved and respected. The burden of this failure is heavy. I shudder to think of the harm I may have caused to the young women involved, to the people who believed in me, and to my own integrity. I had become a man without boundaries, a man who thought that his own willpower could surpass the natural laws of human nature. I lost sight of the fact that purity is not something that can be forced through rigid control. It is a natural state that comes from love, from compassion, and from understanding our limits. This experience, this tragic mistake, has taught me a lesson I wish I had learned sooner. I once believed that purity could be found through denial, through the rejection of the body's desires. But now I understand that true purity comes from the heart. It comes from living with humility, from treating others with kindness and respect, from embracing our human nature and recognizing our weaknesses. I had fallen into the trap of thinking that my own will could overcome the very nature of being human. In my obsession with proving my control over my body and my desires, I had lost sight of the very values that were supposed to guide me, values of respect, dignity, and love. The most important lesson I have learned from this painful experience is that purity is not found in denial. It is found in embracing our humanity, in understanding our limitations, and in treating others with compassion. I now see the mistake I made, the harm I caused, and the lessons I failed to learn in time. In my quest for spiritual purity, I lost sight of the human connections that matter most. I failed to understand that true purity is not an act of self-righteousness or asceticism. It is an act of love and humility. I failed to respect the dignity of others, and in doing so, I failed to respect myself. As I reflect on this chapter of my life, I am filled with regret. But I also know that regret is not enough. It is through humility and the willingness to learn from our mistakes that we find redemption. I hope that my story, my failure, can serve as a reminder to others that the pursuit of holiness must always be tempered by compassion and understanding. The body is not the enemy, nor is desire. It is through kindness, respect, and love that we find our true path to purity. I was mistaken in my actions, and I have paid a heavy price for that mistake. But I have also learned a valuable lesson, a lesson that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. True purity is found in the heart, not in the body. It is found in love, in humility, and in the recognition of our shared humanity. I now see that I was not meant to transcend my human nature, but to embrace it with kindness and compassion. Purity, I have come to understand, is not about perfection. It is about striving to live with integrity, to love without reservation, and to always act with respect for others. That is the true path I now walk, and it is one I will walk with a humble heart, knowing the mistakes I have made and the lessons I have learned.